So in today's video, we're going to be taking apart this 2005 Scion XB with a blown head gasket. But before we do that, I already did a leak down test. I know I'm kind of starting this video late, but what we're going to do here is essentially show you guys what it looks like, a textbook example of air coming out of the cooling system to know that it's coolant leak. So this car has 275,000 miles, and sure enough, when the customer or family friend, I might say in this instance, was telling me that there were so many issues with it just overheating, I had a feeling it was a minute gasket leak, enough where it was just spraying into the piston, steam cleaning the inside of the motor, and causing water to disappear from the cooling system, therefore it overheating after a couple hundred miles. So I will put this camera on a tripod and I'll show you guys what it'll look like to use a leak down tester. And I've done my research. I've used this on multiple cars. I've had my brother-in-law use this. This is actually a pretty good brand. Actually the best ones out of like all the ones I've seen. And if I could find a link, I'll put it in the description below. Till then, let's get to it. So here's what we're gonna need to start before we could actually do the diagnostic. We need obviously our leak down tester. This is optional. This is a inspection camera. This will allow us to look inside the cylinder. You don't have to get this, but I will probably put a link in the description below on this. And we need to take out the spark plugs, the coil packs, and mark them to the according cylinders. On this Scion, it goes from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what I did. Got some masking tape, 1, 2, 3, 4. Penmanship is optional. Another thing I like to add, we also need a 19mm socket to spin the crankshaft on this vehicle. A long screwdriver, preferably something nice and it won't chip inside the engine, because if you have anything chip, you know, it's not going to be...
You're going to have a bad time.
So right now, this engine, I believe the cylinder is already at the top, because I already did the leak down test earlier. You would have to take off this tire on the Scion, take off the little plastic cover, put this on here, and then you would turn it accordingly with the screwdriver inside the cylinder till it makes it up to the very top. Now, especially since this is such a small engine, what's probably going to happen is with you is you'd probably put the piston on the top, and if for whatever reason the piston arm is slightly to the left or slightly to the right, the air is just going to push down on that cylinder and you're going to have to redo everything. So you want to make sure that piston is at straight, because it won't push down on the crankshaft going left or right. So we grab our screwdriver and put it into the corresponding cylinder, since on this engine the two cylinders in the center go up and the two cylinders on the side should be down. So we got our leak down tester right here. All we got to do is get ourselves a steady air supply. This right here, we're gonna plug this in, and like what I like to do is essentially look at our pressure. I'd like to crank it down a little bit, 90, since we're working with a 4-cylinder here, so we're going to put this down to 90 psi. Next, what we want to do is make sure we have enough fluid in the cooling system so we can see the air bubbles just to the tippy top. So once I have water in here, and then I got my air pressure and my leak down tester here ready, all we got to do is push this in, and like I said, there might be a possibility where the cylinder might just shoot straight down. Oh, that seems a little loose. Give me a second here. Let's try that again. Just want to make sure this is tight too. So, as you can see here, water is still coming out from the cooling system, telling us that we have a leak in our head gasket.
Nice.
This is actually pretty normal to have about 9%, but if we look in our box, which I like about this tool, you can see right here that 90 psi being about 80, we're at about a 11% leakage, which most cars you could get away with 20%, but in this case, as you can see, that even though it's sealing properly, there's enough air to escape into the cooling system through the head gasket. So what I'm going to do now is take off the rest of the stuff, like this support bar here that holds down the hood. We're going to take out the intake. We're going to have to take down the intake manifold to see if we can move this wiring harness out of the way to get to the cylinder head, because the cylinder head has to come off now. Take off the gasket, send the cylinder head in the shop. What they're going to do for me at the machine shop is break down the cylinder head, test it, make sure that the cylinder head itself is not the one that's cracked, and hopefully everything is fine and dandy, and we just swap out the gasket, and this engine, after 275 miles, will have another 100,000 miles to run. There's a little hook in here if you ever get the wire caught. Just make sure you don't yank on it, because this is just plastic here and you could easily break that. Also, make sure you have a place to put all your screws. It's always nice having little, what I call my dentist tools. If you don't know if this cable goes to the hood, definitely get some blue tape, mark it, call it a day. This is also completely optional. Having a electric impact driver makes life so much easier. Usually I always take things off with this pretty quick, but when it comes to some engine stuff, you'll see later down the road, I don't use this for everything on the car. But for all the little bolts, it does a quick job of them. What we do is put the alternator bolt back on so we know where it is. Try to keep the screws in there. Now we can see where this wire harness goes. And like I said, grab some blue tape, because a lot of this we're going to start marking. And I think our plan of attack here is what I'm going to do is make sure this is loose enough. I have to get to the crankshaft sensor on the bottom for this side. And then we're going to essentially just move the wire to the back so we can start taking out the intake manifold, the camshaft solenoid, and the alternator bracket at least. We got our blue tape here, got a pen, so what we're going to do now is start marking everything in here in order to make sure everything goes back into place once we put everything back together. What I can do is tape the other side of then enough tape to wrap it around the wire. There you go. Now we know this goes to our camshaft solenoid. Now if you have like two wires here that you know for a fact that go to the alternator, you can wrap them up and just type down alternator. So as you can see, we got one more wire that comes down here. Hopefully the camera picks it up. And we just had to disconnect this plastic piece here and this plastic piece up here. And once we get unplugged this, which I'm just gonna have to clean up because it's really greasy, it'll come right out, and that should free up the main wire harness up on top of the engine. If you're having any issues with the crankshaft sensor, just remember that this little piece pulls down, and while you're pulling that down, this whole thing comes down right here, and that should be able to get the plug out. So we got everything disconnected here. All we gotta do is fish it up. All right, there we go. We got our wire harness up here. Now all we gotta do is mark the rest of this. Now with these plugs, I am just numbering to the corresponding cylinders. So there's 4 cylinders, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It looks like we have some chewed up wires in there to the fuel injector number 2. We're gonna probably have to replace that. one intake mount. So now we're going to just start on this alternator.